Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Double A Team podcast, coming to you live. And thank you very much for joining us once again. I am your host, Stephen Negishi, and with me, as always, is my co-host from the sports media blog, Awful Announcing, associate editor, and also contributor, Ken Fang. Ken, thanks for joining me once again. How are you?
Good to be on with you, Stephen. Glad to be on with you, and hope you're well.
Yes, I had a birthday over the weekend. I turned 47, and
Wow.
yeah, I'm getting old, but it was a lot of fun. Just by myself, but still, I was able to treat myself to a decent meal, and really overall very nice weekend. And the weather's finally warming up around this town, this area too. So hopefully, there are no more cold days left, and we're ready to move on. With the spring and moving forward as well, Ken.
Right. Hope. Yep. And the weather's getting warmer, and you're getting a different. We're getting into a very busy time. College basketball's ready to start with its tournaments. We also have the golf getting into its southern swing and getting into the Masters next month, and then whole bunch of stuff. And of course, baseball will be starting up next month too. So it's all going to be happening quite quickly, Stephen.
Absolutely. And we had an NFL a draft combine over the weekend, which we will touch a little bit on it on our show tonight. But certainly the draft season is upon us. Free agency, illegal tampering period in next week at this time. So there's going to be a flurry of news coming to you. On this, somewhat considered a very slow, sports period, but there's certainly a lot to talk about. So let's get right on it, Ken. We're going to start the show with a very sad news over the weekend. Chris Mortensen, the longtime NFL insider, who we remember on ESPN, and had to be, go away for obviously to treat his throat cancer. Quietly passed away yesterday at the age of 72 in his home in Arkansas. And nowadays we know, Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport. Obviously, those are the big names in football, and there's also a lot of others who are coming into their own. And but
Jay Glazer and all those.
certainly, yeah, yes, thank you, Jay Glazer, among others, absolutely. But there is only those of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s. We all remember Chris Mortensen, the original NFL insider, Ken.
Well, it all began with Will McDonough, who was on the NFL Today. They brought him over from the Boston Globe, and then ESPN quickly had their own with, as you can see there, with Chris Mortensen. He started in the 1990s, and as you mentioned, he had throat cancer. Started in about 2016. He still wasn't feeling that great, but he decided to spend time with his family. Up until about last year was when he decided to. He was still on the air, Stephen. He decided to cut back his appearances on ESPN, and then we just find out the shocking news yesterday, as you mentioned, that he passed away at his, as you mentioned, at his home. The outpouring of support from his colleagues, from at both past and present at ESPN, the football community over in the league, at the NFL, and also reporters from all over who may have just knew him in passing. It just goes to show you that everyone basically said the same thing, that he was very nice, he was very accommodating to younger reporters.
Yeah.
And really, to be honest with you, without McDonough, him, and Peter King, who also appeared on TV as well, without those three, you wouldn't have the insiders that you have on today. As you mentioned, Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network, Tom Pelissero, who's also on NFL Network, Diana Rossini, who's done work on ESPN and also is now on The Athletic. You had Jay Glazer, who I mentioned, over at Fox, Jonathan Jones over at CBS, Mike Florio over at NBC. Yeah, they all started with basically a print background, Stephen, but without they all showed that they could get the job done. But again, without Will McDonough and Chris Mortensen, we wouldn't be able to have those guys on the air, those men and women. And I just feel for his family. You feel for ESPN, which that mentioned many times he was the heart and soul of the network from in the 90s, especially trying to get the story right. Back in the 90s, ESPN began hiring newspaper people like Peter Gibbons to be their baseball insider.
Yeah.
Mortensen was their NFL insider, and then they started hiring other people. And they Hank Goldberg, who of course was a gambling expert.
Right.
They hired other people as well, Stephen. So it just goes to show that Mortensen was able to carve a niche out for himself and do it quite well. And you can just see that ESPN's heart's a little bit heavy today.
Yeah. I actually, remember Mort, as people like to say, because I remember calling. This was, I believe, if I remember, I'm going to share here the Chris Mortensen's Wikipedia page. As you can see here, he was actually born in Torrance, California, where I used to live not too far away. Growing up in Torrance, near Torrance, Redondo Beach, and Palos Verdes, that region. I was living more towards the Palos Verdes side of it, but I remember more. He was on ESPN. I was listening to ESPN Chicago on my phone, and this was when the NFL decided to do like a NFL Draft Vagabond instead of doing it in New York. This was the first year they moved outside of New York in Chicago, and he was on with I believe it was Waddle and Sylvie. I called in during the show, and I was lucky to be on air and speak with Mort live on air. And I told Mort I remember, his work in his early days reading, Daily Breeze from what I hear. And I also told him, remember reading his work on, the National, which unfortunately a national sports newspaper that only lasted one season. And then growing up, I followed Mort's work also on the sporting news. When I was living in Japan, when I was living in the U.S., and then when I subsequently had to leave U.S. and move back to Japan with my entire family, my dad was kind enough to, get a subscription to the sporting news. When I moved back, as a way of me to kind of get, connect with the sports back in the U.S. because we all know back in the early 90s we still didn't even have the internet or any of that kind of stuff. So Mort had a nice real stash, I remember, and then he subsequently went to the current look of where he didn't have a mustache, as you know, which kind of caught me off guard and took me a while to really, really get used to, seeing Mort's face on the sporting news. So, he was really happy that I mentioned his time at Daily Breeze, which is a regional newspaper in Torrance, California. And then, before that, before he began his career as a journalist, he actually went to serve in the Vietnam War for 2 years. And so it's a really great career for Mort. He wrote for AJC, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the National, as we mentioned earlier, which only lasted by 1 year, and then we all know the rest of his career basically from the mid 90s and onwards. He became ESPN, the go-to guy when it comes to all things NFL, and he did it very, very well. And certainly the outpour coming in from all over the place and just mentioning how much Mortensen impacted their career and how much he meant to them entering the industry. And we talked about last week Peter King.
Yep.
Excuse me, Peter King announcing his retirement.
Yes.
From the writing. He no longer writes Football Night in America on NBC Sports. Although I do believe that the King actually posted his final column today on his which is a link to the his Twitter also. But Mort was somebody that I'm very, very familiar with, and I'm incredibly fortunate to have spoken with him on air one last time before he passed away yesterday, Ken.
Yeah, and another thing too is that when he was over at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution before he really started to get into the NFL, he covered the Atlanta Braves in the 1980s. So, and a very nice tribute to him by Dale Murphy, who the Hall of Famer from the Braves, the left fielder who hit a lot of home runs. He noted that Mortensen covered the Braves from 1983 to 1985. And, he said he had some very kind words for Mortensen as well. Mortensen, he covered a lot of sports before he really went into the NFL full time, as you mentioned, at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. You also talked about his time over at the Atlantic. And it was after the Atlantic went down and basically closed shop. It was when ESPN hired him in 1991.
National, right? National.
Yeah, the National, and he did a great job there. And I remember reading him there. The National, of course, having the different covers for different areas. They had a New York cover, they had a Washington cover, they had an Atlanta cover, they would have a Chicago cover. They would be. They thought that they could, have a niche and cover for the sports fans. Unfortunately, it just never caught on. Maybe it was a little bit ahead of its time, but Mortensen. He showed he could write. He did a great job, and journalistically, he would mention several times is that he didn't mind not losing out on a scoop. He wanted to be sure and he wanted to be right. And one other a great tribute was the fact that Peyton Manning announced his retirement, and he gave it to Chris Mortensen, but he asked Mortensen to hold the story for one more day, while he wanted to at least have time with his family to celebrate it. He said, please don't announce it. Please hold it. His editors over at ESPN said, hey, look, if you have the story, you should announce it. He goes, look, I don't care if anybody else beats me to it. Peyton Manning asked me to sit on it and hold it. I'm going to respect that. And that's how it goes to show you how what type of reporter he was. Yes, he said, look, if someone beats me, fine, but I just want to hold. I wanted to let Peyton Manning. I wanted to give him my word that I was going to not report it until the day after, and that's exactly what happened. And he got the scoop. He got the story and was able to report it the following day, as was planned by Peyton Manning when he finally retired from the Denver Broncos back in 2018. So it goes to show you how much respect that he had from players, from reporters, from colleagues, from all over, no matter what sport. So again, our condolences go out to his family, his and also to ESPN, his colleagues, and all that knew him, because as you mentioned, Stephen, he was a fine reporter and well-rounded, and as you mentioned, had a mustache. He talked about that in the book. Those Guys Have All the Fun: Inside the World of ESPN, that was written by James Andrew Miller. I contacted James Andrew Miller last night to get a quote from him for a story I wrote for An Awful Announcing that came out today in regards to that. It was about all the ESPN colleagues who paid tribute to him. In the book, you mentioned his mustache. He said that he was going to be hired at ESPN, and all of a sudden, the night before he made his very first appearance, he was asked to shave his mustache off, and it was something that he felt that was his look. He had never shaved it off. He always had it from his days in serving in Vietnam. And he said, "All right, I'm a team player. I'll do it." And the reason was given is that he looked scary. He looked mean. So he shaved it off, and he just felt for up for almost a year afterwards, he just felt that he lost his identity. But he was joked about that. But we all eventually knew him without his mustache, Stephen. And of course, unfortunately, when he had cancer, he lost all his hair because he was undergoing chemotherapy. It was a shock to see him totally bald after 2016 and 2017 as he was undergoing treatment for throat cancer. But he got his hair back. He after it went into remission. He was luckily he was able to fight cancer and hold on for a few more years. And we cherished that time with him, Stephen, because as I mentioned, without that, he never would have been able to report that story on Peyton Manning's retirement. So a man who's of integrity, a man who, of course, not well liked by Patriots fans over Deflategate, but he did what he could and report as accurately as he could.
Yeah, our condolences to Mortensen family, and hopefully the the legacy of Chris Mortensen will be long remembered and carried on for many years to come.
100%.
All right, let's stick to the theme of the NFL from the news from the weekend. Obviously, Chris Mortensen's death, obviously not a player, but it still hits the industry very hard. But today, Jason Kelce, as expected, announced his retirement, which was not a real surprise. And Ken, your thoughts on Jason Kelce officially making himself announced his retirement today?
Again, as you mentioned, not a surprise, but it was mentioned that it was expected of him. He's definitely going to go in the Hall of Fame as a great center, great offensive lineman. Apparently, one of the people who is a main person, one of the main players in the tush push that Philadelphia used throughout the last season. From what I understand, I'm not going to say the whole thing, but apparently to get himself ready, and apparently this has been confirmed, whenever he got ready to do the tush push, he would yell "F my life" and go full forward and get really angry and started pushing and blocking and to get so he could get Jalen Hurts that one extra yard, Stephen. So very funny. Of course, we all remember him after the Philadelphia Eagles beat the New England Patriots in Super Bowl 52. He dressed as one of those mummers in Philadelphia, celebrating the Super Bowl win and the Super Bowl parade, and of course going to Kansas City and taking his shirt off for the championship. In the same
that was a Buffalo game, I believe. Right?
The Buffalo game with Taylor Swift in the box. Very funny, man. He definitely. Because of, as you can see, he was tearful. He was he cried there, but he's basically spent. I think he spent all of his career with Philadelphia, Stephen, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. And of course,
13 years.
Yep, and he and his brother Travis, who apparently will continue playing for Kansas City for at least another year, have that successful podcast. A little bit more successful than ours, not by much. They have a podcast together, the number one sports podcast. His wife Donna Kelce, his wife also appears on, not Donna. Donna's his mother, but his wife also appears on it.
Yeah, Kylie, yes.
Kylie appears on it. She's hilarious. And the fact that he of course appeared on that Amazon movie Kelce that appeared last year as well. It was the number one movie on Amazon for a few weeks, Stephen. Yeah. So he's a personality, and he transcends sports. And he was negotiating with CBS during Super Bowl week and NBC as well. Those are the two favorites for him to continue on to do his post-career as an analyst. I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the studio, at least maybe for CBS or NBC. Andrew Marchand reported that today on The Athletic. So I wouldn't be surprised to be seeing him at least on one of those networks starting in September of later this year.
Yeah, I'm going to play a clip of his
Go ahead.
parts of the probably the beginning of the press conference. Here we go.
Thanks, Brett. I won't forget falling short to the Chiefs and the conflicted feeling of immense heartbreak I had selfishly. For myself and for my teammates. And at the same time, the amount of pride I had that my brother had climbed the mountaintop once again. We have a small family. We have a small family. We have a small family. No cousins. One aunt, one uncle. It was really my brother and I our whole lives. We did almost everything together. Competed, fought, laughed, cried, and learned from each other. We invented games, imagined ourselves as star players of that time. We'd envision making the winning plays day after day on Coleridge Road. We won countless Super Bowls in our minds before ever leaving the house.
So basically, Jason was talking about losing to his brother in the Super Bowl, but I think he was very much happy that at least his brother came out on top. And you hear the phrase in sports, people wearing emotions in their sleeves, and I can't think of a better person, who wore that than Jason Kelce, in my opinion. He was such a character, somebody who really embraced life, and no matter what he does in his post life, and I'm sure he's going to get a lot of calls to do, media. Perhaps maybe, one thing we forgot to mention, Amazon might be looking for someone, to be paired with, Al or Kirk. Maybe Kelce could be, Herb Street's replacement, whether it's this upcoming year or maybe next year, or at least be one of the guys who do the halftime, reports at the on-site. So that's what I'm kind of leaning towards. But no matter what he does in his life, I think he's going to be very, very successful. And I can't think of more. Can't think of a brothers or even sisters who were prolific and was just as good and dominant in any sports together, Ken. And Kelce's this past year were center, front and center all over the country. And Jason, usually being an offensive lineman, no one gets that much attention at all. And whether it was largely due to Travis and him dating Taylor Swift or not, but Jason was a character, and I think congratulations to his well-deserved retirement, and hopefully whatever he does in his post-football life, it will be just as successful off the field as he was on the field, Ken.
Yeah, like I mentioned, like I said, the Athletics, Andrew Marchand feels that he'll be either at NBC or CBS due to the proximity of those two networks to Philadelphia, and him rather not traveling as much. But Amazon is an outside shot, as you mentioned. He does have the movie that he did have there, Kelsey, that showed his family life with his wife, and also his daughters, and showed his family life, and how much he's beloved in Philadelphia. I would think, Stephen, that even if he does just podcast alone, which is like I said, just barely a little bit more successful than ours. I say that in facetiously, but of course we all know it's how popular it is. It seems like every time he and Travis get together, it somehow makes news. Whether it's saying, even going back to when they were talking about Travis wanting to go out with uh, uh, Taylor Swift, it's just funny the way that they just handle each other. They're very funny.
Yeah.
They're very genuine, which I think fans in Philadelphia appreciate.
Yeah.
And he seems to want to make Philadelphia his home, his permanent home. So I don't think he's going to be leaving there anytime soon. But as I mentioned, he's probably going to be on one of the TV networks next season. He's a natural at it. He's very charismatic. He's one of those people that could either be one of the people who on the NFL Today, part of a very which the show will probably be overhauled, or just joining an existing cast over at NBC's Football Night in America. We'll have to wait and see, Stephen. We'll wait and see what goes on there, but it's all going to be quite interesting. If I can mention one other piece of news that came out of the NFL scouting combine this weekend, there is really heavy talk about an 18th regular season game. This is something you and I have mentioned before, Stephen, but
Right.
now apparently momentum is going to be carrying this through. Now they have to collectively bargain this. It has to be in the next collective bargaining agreement, but it appears momentum is heading that way.
Mhm.
If it happens, and I think it will, it means the networks are going to love that because they'll get 18 regular season games. I do believe in the collective bargaining agreement, and I know the players are concerned about injuries. I think somehow to appease the players association, they'll add an extra bye, so we'll
Yeah.
have 20 weeks of regular season football, 2 weeks, 2 bye weeks, and then perhaps they'll eliminate the bye for the number one team and have a 8 game. Um,
Yeah, eight in each conferences. So basically, half of the team of each conferences
yeah.
are
So
going to, you know, make it to
yeah.
the postseason.
Right.
And you just wondered, if we're going to have 18 games, there's going to be a lot of pushbacks from the players, obviously,
Obvious.
because
Yeah.
obviously,
But it's such a weak union, Stephen, that I really don't. I think it's going to go through no matter what.
right,
Um, and like I said, they'll say, "Hey, look, you're going to get extra money. You're going to get an extra paycheck, and during that week, you'll also get an extra bye week. We'll also have, instead of having a bye week for the top team during wild card weekend, they will play. So they'll have 8 games on wild card weekend instead of 6. So, Stephen, it's going to be quite interesting to see how they handle that. It's going to be
hmm
to see how they handle how they handle an 18th week, if they go 19 weeks during the regular season or 20, and then if that happens, it goes the Super Bowl's pushed back maybe another week or 2 weeks, which
yeah,
means perhaps maybe towards the end of February. So really, the NFL is finding a way to flex its muscles and give more football, and I think that's what. And meanwhile, while the players, are concerned about safety, it's also going to be meaning more football for the networks and for fans. And as we all know, football is king in the ratings here in the United States.
right. Eventually, I kind of see the current format gone, like in college football. We might have like a no more, conference. We have AFC and NFC, which is going to exist, but I think, there will be no more divisions moving forward in the future. I think
Maybe.
you're just going to have like 16 teams in each conferences anyway, right?
Right.
So you're going to have 15, NFC games, let's just say, for example, and then you might pick maybe 3 teams from the AFC. I don't know how they were going to basically choose if they go in the 18-game schedule. So I kind of see that happening. If what's happening in college football, because of the money and everything, I could see the NFL maybe following the similar path. Eventually, you're going to have 1 through 6. If you're going to only pick 8 teams from the each conferences to even out the playoffs and not give the top seed any competitive advantages, you might as well just do the whole thing. 1 through 16 in each conferences, and then I know people will bemoan about it, but I could see that this could be the first step towards maybe getting rid of the conferences, or divisions. Excuse me,
Right.
divisions. No more East, South, North or West. Just basically, you put all 16 teams face each other annually, and just basically, and then pick the 3 teams from the AFC based on the where they finished a year ago or something like that, and
Right.
just I think we could be going in that direction right now. So
It'd be interesting. It'd be quite
it will
interesting.
be interesting. I think NFL might have to do that way radically in order to keep the interest of the fans, because you might want to see, teams face each other, every year rather than just wait for maybe every couple of years now or something
Right.
like that. So, but it'll be very, very interesting. Also, one other note from the NFL today. This was expected. Russell Wilson officially released. This was no surprise.
Yep.
His contract that he signed, a 5-year, $245 million, never really kicked in. It's ironic he was released, in the year that it was supposed to kick in, starting this year. So Denver Broncos really, really messed themselves up, and set themselves really, really badly now. And Sean Payton is obviously there to clean up the mess. And the George Patton, the GM for the Broncos, who engineered that trade, somehow still has a job. But with Payton flexing his muscles there, I'm pretty sure it's only a matter of time where Payton ousts Patton and try to steer the Broncos out of the abyss and move into the different directions. And will be very interesting to see where Russell Wilson ends up. Yeah, I don't think he's formally washed up yet, but his days as an NFL starter could be over, and whoever signs him, they might have to understand. Wilson perhaps himself has to understand he's a clipboard holder. He's just basically warming it up for a hot shot rookie before he takes over, whether it's this year or maybe next year. So the shelf life of Russell Wilson isn't long, and for an athlete of his caliber, or even in any sport, it's so difficult for many to come to acceptance that they're not the player that they once were. And it was acrimonious times for both Broncos and Wilson, unfortunately. And I'll be very curious to see how the Broncos move on from Wilson. Do they get a quarterback this year? And as for Wilson, where he goes with his career moving forward, Ken.
Yeah, it was a very strange fit to begin with. When we all saw that the Seahawks and Pete Carroll decided to part ways with Russell Wilson, we all thought it was very strange. But then we saw a big drop off with Wilson, basically in his final season with the Seahawks, and for them to trade for Geno Smith. It was actually, no, they didn't trade for Geno Smith, but they basically handed the job to Geno Smith to be the quarterback, Steven. It was a very strange move. We all thought it was a strange move at the time, but then we saw how badly Russell Wilson played in the year with the the coach in before with who now went to the Jets, Hackett. We just saw how badly that he played, and he made poor decisions. And we thought that maybe with Peyton, who is a quarterback friendly coach, maybe he would improve. And there was some improvement, but not a whole lot. And you could see that Peyton really didn't have a lot of trust or faith in Russell Wilson. But the fact is that when his bonus was going to kick in, he basically sat him, and it was very acrimonious. It wasn't a very good fit with Russell Wilson in Denver to begin with. It wasn't. He was trying to do too much. He made bad decisions. He threw interceptions all over the place. So I'm really, like I said, Stephen, there was a reason that Pete Carroll traded and was so willing to part ways with Russell Wilson. And we thought that Wilson, he and Wilson had a good relationship going. He won a Super Bowl together, but there was a reason why that Pete Carroll made that decision, Stephen. And now we see that two seasons later, Russell Wilson is a cast-off. And like you mentioned, we don't know where he's going to go. If he still wants to play, he's going to have to be a backup. There's no doubt about that. He doesn't. We see that he just doesn't have the arm strength anymore. He still does have the athleticism to run and use his legs. But other than that, Stephen, he just doesn't have the arm strength anymore. He can't really throw the long ball. He can't really make the right decision. No matter with Nathaniel Hackett's system or Sean Payton's system, it really doesn't matter, Stephen. It doesn't matter at this point. He just doesn't have the ability to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, and that's really sad to see because here's a guy that has great numbers back when he was in his prime, but it just goes to show when you lose it, it goes very fast, Stephen. And right now, as you mentioned, he's going to have to be a backup somewhere if he wants to continue playing in the National Football League.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to a quick couple of stories. The current state of the U.S. soccer is something that I want to try and mention.
Sure.
U.S. women's national team lost to Mexico for the first time in their U.S. soil. I remember. I know U.S. beat Colombia yesterday, 3-0. But between last week we discussed about the MLS having to use a replacement refs, and the negotiations hasn't been all that going well as of right now.
Not at all.
Not at all. And MLS also announcing last week that they're only putting in 8 out of the 30 teams in the US Open Cup, also known as the Lamar Hunt Cup. And they're using the scheduling congestions as a reasons for, it's a poor excuse, because Minnesota United recently scheduled a midweek friendly with a team from Ireland. Okay, you're using congestion as an excuse because you're hosting a meaningless, team, with all due respect, in the middle of the week, and you won't even put a decent team to compete for the historical cups. It goes to show that MLS is trying to outruin the U.S. soccer and has no regards of the rules that are in place by the U.S. Soccer Federation and U.S. Soccer, and the U.S. women struggling in recent weeks. Ken, I do worry that the women's national team has kind of kept the U.S. soccer interest amongst the fans for a long time. But now that the women is expected to struggle, and the rest of the world is catching on, because obviously they have a lot of major clubs that can afford a women's team, that they're able to develop talent that are not necessarily based on physicality, but more on the technical aspect of it, which U.S. struggles in both men and women to develop a more tactically aware and then also technically apt players. So right now, I think there aren't that many good newses in the involving U.S. soccer, both men and women's. Unfortunately, right now.
Let me just say it because I'm going to have to go quickly. But in regards to the women, they did play a much better game against Colombia yesterday. They played the high press, which is more towards their style. The more the athleticism. Trinity Rodman assisted on a couple of goals yesterday. And they played a much better game against Colombia. Now, granted, I didn't see the game against Mexico. They're playing in the CONCACAF W Gold Cup. This is the first time they're playing this. We're seeing teams from South America and North America play in this. Canada, Mexico, Brazil, and the United States are gone to the semifinals. They'll play on Wednesday. I think they're going to be playing at Snapdragon Stadium on Wednesday, and I believe the United States is taking on Mexico, if I'm not mistaken. So they're going to have to play a little bit better than they did the other day in group stage. But if they play that high press, Steven, which showed their athleticism, and they're able to go and they attacked more instead of staying back. If you remember, they played under the style of Vladko, who was in the World Cup. It was a really horrible system. It was a system that really didn't take advantage of the players' athleticism. And then they played the high press yesterday, a pressing style, a style that made them go forward. It was a much better, more conducive style for the women. And if they play this style a lot more, I think they have a very good chance, Stephen, in the Olympics. I'm going to say that right now. They're going to have to play this. Now, a lot of us were wondering, where was this style during the entire group stage? But if they continue to play this and play well, I think they have something. They might have clicked something here. Now, as we mentioned, the women are in a transition. They're going from the great teams that they had, the World Cup winning teams over the last couple of World Cups. And of course, they didn't play that well in Australia. But like I mentioned, they're trying to transition to play well, for the Olympics in Paris. No women's World Cup winner has ever won the gold medal in the Olympics, and this has happened to the United States a few times when they didn't win when they didn't win the World Cup. They went on to win the gold medal in the Olympics. So we'll see if this continues for them, not winning the World Cup last year and then going on to win the gold medal the following year. We'll see if that happens, but the team has to be hungry. They showed some good play yesterday, some good chemistry. If this is if they can do this again against Mexico, I think there's some optimism. But we'll have to wait and see how they play against Mexico, which showed some very good flair on Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. Emma Hayes, as you can see here, will take over in April next month, and then the first game will be in Allianz Field in Minnesota to face South Korea on June 4th. Now, I would assume she's been keeping an eye on the U.S. Soccer while she still tries to finish out her coaching career at Chelsea, women's team. So I'm sure she's kind of giving out some instructions to the current interim U.S. Coaching staff on how to practice and how to do, tactically. So I think it's in testing phases, but now Emma Hayes is expected to take over. And, this isn't like a cure-all for U.S.'s soccer problems. This is a long-term problem that U.S. has to, tackle. They haven't been able to do that with men's side. And, obviously the women's soccer, that their grip on the dominance is, nearing its end right now. So U.S., I hope, have a solid and long-term vision with Emma Hayes in order to develop a, women back into the national, world powerhouse that they were once. So now on that note, we're going to end the show. Obviously, Ken's got a tight schedule. We were going to talk about Caitlin Clark's NCAA record breaking, which we will save that for next time, Ken. So Ken, I appreciate you coming on tonight once again to do the show. A programming note. Tomorrow night, I am having a regular Tuesday night interview with Rashad Shakiri to discuss the more in depth about the NFL Combine over the weekend. And I'm also welcoming special guest Herb Lawrence from the CHGO website, which is a all city sports network. He'll be joining us to discuss all things NFL and the Chicago Bears. And then on Thursday, Alex Pat, a previous guest that I mistakenly forgot that we were supposed to do the show last Thursday, but we're going to do the show this Thursday, confirmed to do the Chicago Cubs and also discuss all things baseball. So I hope I will post it on Twitter on my timeline. So I hope you will join us. We got a loaded show this week, and we will also come back next week, hopefully Monday, to do. Ken and I will be back again next Monday to do this show. Now, on behalf of the AA Team podcast live stream, for Ken Fang, I am Stephen Negishi. Good night, and we'll see you next week, same time, hopefully, on the AA Team Network. Have a great night, everybody. Ken, thank you for joining us once again.